He stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday night, looked me dead in the eyes, and said something I will carry to my grave. He said, "Mama, raising us was your job. That's what parents do. You don't get extra credit for it. My own son. In my own kitchen. After everything." What he didn't know, what neither of my sons knew, was that 3 months before that night, I had signed my house over to someone else entirely. Not to family. Not to anyone named in my will. To a woman named Rosa, who had shown up for me when my blood couldn't be bothered. And when Marcus arrived that Saturday morning with a rented truck and a plan to move his whole family into what he assumed was still my home, that's when the world cracked wide open. My name is Evelyn Price. I am 74 years old, and I have lived in the West End neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia, for 41 years. I'm telling you this story because I spent a lifetime staying quiet, and staying quiet almost cost me everything. I want to be honest with you before we go any further. This isn't a story I enjoy telling. There's no pleasure in admitting that the people you sacrificed the most for turned out to be the ones who saw you least clearly. But I've learned something in the last year that I wish someone had told me 40 years ago. There is a difference between the family that made you and the family that chooses you, and sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is recognize which is which. I married Harold Price when I was 26. He was 30, worked in HVAC installation, had the kind of laugh that filled a room from corner to corner. We bought a house on Avon Avenue with a screened porch out back and a pecan tree in the yard that my boys would climb until I screamed myself hoarse worrying about their necks. We had 2 sons, Marcus first, then Dion, 2 years later. Harold worked long hours, early mornings, late evenings, weekends when the emergency calls came in. I stayed home with the boys, which was the choice we made together. I don't regret it. I want to be clear about that. I don't regret a single morning I spent at that kitchen table helping with homework, or a single night I sat up with a sick child, or a single Saturday I spent driving someone to a tournament, or a practice, or a friend's house. I loved being their mother. I poured myself into it the way some people pour themselves into a career or a calling. It was mine. When Marcus wanted to play travel baseball, I took on weekend daycare to cover the fees. When Dion needed a tutor for his reading delays, I sold my grandmother's china to pay for it. When they went to college, Marcus to Georgia State, Dion to Savannah College, Harold and I refinanced the house. First-generation college graduates in both our families. I stood in Marcus's dorm room that first move-in day, trying to hold myself together, and he put his arms around me and said, "We made it, Mama. Because of you." I held on to that. For years, I held on to that. Harold died 9 years ago. Stroke. He was 67, healthy as far as we knew, and then one morning he wasn't. The boys came for the funeral. They were good boys, they cried. They hugged me. They told me they'd look after me. Marcus lived in Buckhead by then, working in corporate logistics. Dion had moved to Charlotte for a marketing job. After the service, they stayed 4 days. Then life called them back. The visits became twice a year, then once. The phone calls became birthday calls, then text messages on birthdays. I started sending cards with $50 bills inside and getting back one-word replies. Thanks. Got it. Received. I told myself this was normal. Children grow up. Children build their own lives. I wasn't going to be one of those mothers who guilted her sons into obligation. I had friends who did that and watched their children pull away like tide going out. So I stayed quiet. I volunteered at a food pantry on Cascade Road 3 mornings a week. I joined a quilting circle. I started an herb garden in the backyard. I stayed busy. But I was lonely in a way that busy doesn't fix. The house echoed. I'd cook for 4 out of muscle memory and stand at the stove, realizing what I'd done. Harold's HVAC tools were still in the garage. His reading glasses were still on the nightstand. I couldn't move them. I couldn't make the house feel smaller. Then 2.5 years ago, I fell. The gutters needed clearing. I had a ladder. I'd done it a dozen times, but I leaned too far reaching for a clump of wet leaves, and the ladder walked sideways on the concrete, and I came down hard hip first, then shoulder, then the side of my head catching the edge of the porch step. My neighbor Carolyn heard me from across the yard and called 911. The hospital told me I was fortunate, nothing had snapped. Deep bruising, they said. Possible soft tissue damage in the hip. At my age, recovery takes time. The doctor was straightforward with me. I'd need in, Home support for several weeks, possibly longer. Could family come? I called Marcus from the hospital bed. I heard him typing before he even said hello. Mama, we're in the middle of a product rollout. It's brutal right now. Can you use the service? I'll pay for it. I said I'd figure it out. I called Dion. His mother-in-law had just had knee surgery and was staying with them. The house is full, he said, but an in-home aide is probably better anyway. More professional, more professional. I set the phone down on the bed rail and looked at the ceiling for a long time. I want to stop here and say something, because I know some of you understand exactly what that ceiling feels like. When you're lying in a hospital bed and you've just been told that your recovery is more inconvenient than a product rollout. When you realize, quietly, with no drama, that you are not the kind of emergency your children rearrange for. If you have ever felt that specific silence, the silence of realizing you have become background noise to the people you would have crossed the country for, I need you to know you are not imagining it. And you are not alone. The agency sent Rosa Delgado the day I came home. She was 56 years old, a widow, 22 years in home health, originally from San Antonio. She had silver-streaked hair she kept pinned back and a way of moving through a space that was efficient without being cold. From the very first morning, something was different. She didn't just manage me, she talked to me. She asked about the quilt on the bedroom wall. She asked about Harold. She asked whether I preferred my eggs scrambled soft or firm, and remembered the answer the next day without being told. She brought me a library book she'd spotted at a sale because she'd overheard me mention I liked mysteries. Small things. Specific things. The kind of things people do when they're actually paying attention. We were both widows. Her husband, Ernesto, had died in a scaffolding accident 11 years before. We talked about what grief does to a house, how it fills the corners, how it lives in the objects. We talked about raising children alone. We talked about the specific exhaustion of being the person everyone relies on, and the specific hunger of having no one to rely on in return. 3 months into my recovery, when I no longer needed daily help, I asked her to stay on twice a week. For cleaning and company, I said. She agreed without hesitation. Those Tuesday and Friday visits became the anchors of my week. She remembered my shellfish allergy. She brought tamales her daughter made when she had extras. For my 72nd birthday, she organized a gathering called my Quilting Circle Friends, invited Carolyn from next door, decorated the screened porch with lights. Marcus sent flowers via an app. Dion called at 9 in the morning and talked for 7 minutes. Rosa spent 2 days planning it. She baked a peach cake from scratch because she'd heard me mention once, just once, that Harold always requested peach cake. That birthday was when the picture became fully clear to me. I had raised 2 sons for more than 2 decades. I had given them everything. I had my time, my money, my body, my sleep, my ambitions, and they managed 1 call a month when they remembered. This woman, who owed me nothing beyond a professional arrangement, had become more present in my daily life than my own children had been in a decade. I wasn't angry yet. I was just clear. About 18 months before the confrontation, Dion called on a Thursday afternoon. I knew from his voice something was wrong. A real estate venture had gone badly, a partner had taken money and disappeared, leaving him holding an unfinished property and a threatened lawsuit. He needed $22,000. You've got the house paid off, Mama. Harold's insurance left you comfortable. I'll pay you back in 6 months. I swear. What kind of mother says no to her son in a genuine crisis? I transferred the money the next morning. 6 months passed. A year. When I brought it up gently on a Christmas call, he got defensive immediately. Mama, I've got 3 kids, a mortgage, expenses you don't understand. You're not hurting. Give me time. He made me feel greedy for asking. I went quiet. Stayed quiet. 8 months after that, Marcus called asking for $16,000 toward his daughter's college gap. I sent it. Never saw it back. When I eventually raised it, Mama, that's what family does. What family does? I turned that phrase over in my mind for a long time. What family does flows one direction, apparently. Meanwhile, Rosa kept showing up. When I caught a flu so bad I could barely stand, she came every day that week without being asked and refused extra payment. You're my friend. Friends look after each other. When a pipe burst in the basement, she connected me with her nephew, a plumber, who fixed it at cost, wouldn't take a tip. When Harold's anniversary hit and the grief climbed up my chest like a vine, she took me to lunch on Martin Luther King Drive and let me talk for 3 hours without looking at her phone once. I started thinking seriously about what came next. I was 72, reasonably healthy, but I knew my body was not permanent. If I needed real care, prolonged care, what would happen? My sons would find a facility, they'd visit on holidays, they'd feel guilty but not guilty enough to rearrange their lives. I'd watched it happen to women I knew. Good women, devoted mothers. I knew the answer because I'd already seen how they handled a ladder fall. And so, I went to see my attorney, a man named Gerald Okafor, who had handled Harold's estate and knew me well. "Evelyn," he said, after I explained what I wanted to do, "I need to be certain you understand the full weight of this. You want to transfer the deed on Avon Avenue to a woman outside your immediate family." "She is my immediate family," I said. "She's just not blood." He leaned back in his chair. "Once you sign, the property belongs to Rosa Delgado. You retain a life estate, you can live there as long as you live, but you cannot sell, you cannot refinance, and your sons will not inherit the property." "I know. They may challenge it." "Let them." He paused. He knew when I was decided. He walked me through every implication. He recommended and I agreed that I see a psychologist for a formal competency evaluation. I spent 2 hours with a clinical psychologist named Dr. Time, Abena Asante, who asked me every question imaginable about my relationships, my finances, my reasoning, and my understanding of consequences. She found me fully competent, fully aware, fully free. 2 weeks later, Rosa and I sat in Gerald's office. He read through everything again. Before he finished, Rosa was crying. "I can't take this," she said. "This is your home." "It was my house," I said quietly. "You made it a home. There's a difference. I need to know that when I can't care for myself, I'll have someone who genuinely cares. You've already shown me who you are. This is me showing you who I am." She tried to refuse 3 more times. Gerald explained the legal protections for both of us. I told her this was what I needed. Finally, she accepted. We signed on a Wednesday afternoon in February. The house Harold and I had bought 4 decades ago, the house where my boys had climbed that pecan tree, became Rosa's, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Certainty. I didn't tell my sons. I had no obligation to. It was my house, my decision, and it had never been theirs to begin with. Life continued. Rosa still came twice a week. Nothing between us changed except that she now owned the place, which meant the weight of the future had lifted from my shoulders and been shared with someone who wanted to share it. I quilted. I gardened. I went to the pantry on Cascade Road. I made my peace with my son's distance. I stopped waiting for them to be something they'd already shown me they weren't. Then Marcus lost his job. He called on a Tuesday evening. I was shelling butter beans at the kitchen table. His name on my phone at 7 in the evening was unusual enough that my stomach dropped before I answered. Corporate downsizing. 15 years with the company, gone in a layoff round. Severance wasn't enough. His wife Tamara worked part-time at a dental office. Their rent in Buckhead was beyond what they could carry on her income alone. They'd already given notice on their apartment, and, he said in a tone that was not quite asking, he was thinking they could stay with me while he figured things out. Few months. He and Tamara and the kids. Made sense. I had space. We were family. Not a question. An announcement. I sat very still. I set the butter beans down. I thought about Rosa's signature on those papers. I thought about Gerald's office. I thought about Dr. Asante's evaluation. I thought about what I'd built quietly and carefully while my sons weren't paying attention. And I thought about every time I'd said nothing when I should have spoken. "Marcus," I said, "there's something I need to tell you." "What?" His voice shifted. Not worried, impatient. "The house isn't mine anymore. I transferred the deed 2 years ago." Silence. The kind that has weight. "You transferred to Dion? You gave Dion the house?" "I didn't give it to Dion." "Then who?" His voice was getting loud. "Who did you give it to, Mama?" "Who?" "To Rosa. My caregiver." The explosion was immediate and complete. He accused Rosa of manipulation, of preying on a lonely old woman, of elder abuse. He used that phrase several times, elder abuse, in a voice that was half outrage and half desperation. He said he was calling Dion. He hung up. Within the hour, I was on a conference call with both of them, both shouting at various volumes about their inheritance, about strangers, about how could I, about what I was thinking. I want you to understand something about that phone call. I had spent 50 years being the calm one. The one who absorbed everyone else's feelings and made them manageable. That Tuesday night I was calm again, but for the first time, the calm wasn't self-erasure, it was armor. You want to tell me why you deserved it? I asked, when they paused long enough for me to speak. Because you're our mother, Dion said. Because we're your family. You're my family when there's something in it for you, I said. Where were you when I was on the ground outside this house? Where were you on Christmas the last 3 years? Where is the $40,000 you both promised to return? We have our own lives, Marcus said. We can't drop everything to babysit you. And there it was, babysit. As if caring about your mother was a chore you'd been underpaid for. I never asked you to babysit me, I said. I asked you to be my sons. We're getting a lawyer, Dion said. This is a scam. She manipulated you. Go ahead, I told him. Gerald Okafor prepared everything. I was psychologically evaluated. Every step was documented and witnessed. You'll spend money you don't have and accomplish nothing. Then Marcus said it. He didn't shout it. He said it evenly, almost reasonably, which made it worse. Mama? You raised us. That was your job. What parents do. You don't get a medal for doing what you were supposed to do. I didn't answer right away. I let it sit in the air. I wanted to feel the full shape of it. You're right, I finally said. It was a job. 25 years of unpaid labor. Consider this my severance package. Goodbye. I hung up and sat in the kitchen in the dark for a long time. My hands were shaking. My heart was going too fast. But underneath all of it, underneath the adrenaline and the grief and the strange specific pain of finally having your worst suspicion confirmed out loud, there was something else, something I hadn't felt in so long I'd forgotten what it was. Power. My own power. I had stopped giving it away. I called Rosa. She was there in 40 minutes. She didn't say much. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and held my hands and let me talk and let me cry and didn't once tell me everything would be fine. Because she was too honest for that. After a while I asked her, "Did I do the right thing?" She looked at me for a moment. "You did the brave thing," she said. Which in my experience is usually harder. Marcus arrived that Saturday morning exactly as planned. A rented truck, him and Tamara and their 2 kids. He started unloading boxes onto my front walk before he'd even rung the bell. I opened the door. "You need to go," I said. "Mama." He tried the reasonable voice. "Let's just talk inside. You can't turn away your grandchildren. This isn't my house to offer you, Marcus." I kept my voice level. "I'm a tenant here by legal arrangement. You'd need to speak to the owner. Where is she?" He looked past me into the hallway. "Where's this Rosa? I want to talk to her. She's working, caring for someone who actually needs her. I'd suggest you call ahead next time." Tamara stepped forward, eyes wet. "Evelyn. Please. We have nowhere." "You've had months," I said gently. Because I did feel for her, I genuinely did. She hadn't created this situation. Marcus knew this was coming. There was time to make other arrangements. The choices that brought you to my door this morning aren't mine to fix. His face changed then. The reasonable mask slipped. "You'll end up alone," he said. "Bitter and alone, and you'll have no one to blame but yourself." "I'd rather be alone than disrespected in my own kitchen," I said. "And I'm not alone. That's what you still don't understand. I have people who actually want me here. They just don't share my last name. Now please take those boxes off my property." He loaded the truck back up. The children looked confused. I felt the sadness of that. I did. Children don't make their father's choices, but I also knew that if I broke then, I would never stop breaking. I watched them drive away and closed the door and sat on the floor of my front hallway and cried until I was empty. And then, slowly, I felt something rise up to fill the space. The legal challenge came as expected. Dion's attorney sent letters about undue influence, competency, exploitation of the elderly. Gerald responded methodically, the psychological evaluation, the documented process, the statements from neighbors and friends who had watched Rosa and me become family in real time. Carolyn next door wrote about watching Rosa refuse extra pay during my flu. My quilting circle friends wrote about meeting Rosa at my birthday and watching how she listened when I talked, how she remembered details months later. The attorney pushed hard for 6 weeks. Then the letters stopped. Gerald called on a Monday. They'd dropped it. No case. Everything had been done correctly and they had nothing. My sons went silent. Completely. No calls. No texts. Nothing. I waited for the devastation of that. Waited for the grief of losing children to arrive the way grief usually does in waves, when you least expect it. But it didn't come. What came instead was quiet. A very specific, very deep quiet, the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for something that was never coming. Rosa moved in 2 months after that. She sold her smaller place in East Point and moved into the spare room. We split the cooking, the cleaning, the decisions about what color to repaint the porch. She brought her daughter Marisol, a high school teacher, who sits at my kitchen table and grades papers some evenings, and tells me stories about her students that make me laugh until I have to put my tea down. Her son Carlos, who does construction, came over one Saturday and fixed the gate on the back fence and wouldn't hear of being paid. "Your family," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Thanksgiving came. My first without even the pretense of a call from my sons. I had prepared myself for it. I'd made a list of things I was grateful for and put it on the refrigerator. Rosa called on Monday of that week. "You're coming to our house Thursday. Marisol is cooking. Carlos and his family will be there. 2 o'clock. Don't argue." I started to say it was their family time. "You are family," she said. "Stop arguing and bring the peach cake." I walked into that house on Thanksgiving afternoon, and it hit me before I even got through the door, the smell of food, the sound of children, the specific warmth of a home that is genuinely full. Carlos's youngest, a 5-year-old named B, ran to the door and grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the kitchen to show me the paper turkeys she'd drawn. She had made one for me. She'd written my name on it in crayon, spelled wrong and perfect. I held that drawing and understood something I had been circling for years. There is a difference between being someone's obligation and being someone's joy. My sons had loved me the way people love a utility consistently, as long as it was functioning, and with frustration when it made demands. Rosa's family loved me the way people love a person. They were glad I was there. Not just accommodating me. Glad. I am 74 years old. I have 5, maybe 20 years left, nobody knows, and I stopped pretending to. What I know is what I intend to do with them. I intend to spend them surrounded by people who chose me back. People who show up not because I am their responsibility but because my presence adds something to their life. People who remember how I take my coffee and save me a seat and draw my name in crayon and mean it. To everyone watching, if you are in a relationship with a child, a partner, a sibling, anyone where the love only flows one direction, I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it honestly. What would you do today if you stopped waiting for them to change? Not as punishment. Not as revenge. Just as an act of care toward yourself. What would you do? This story taught me that silence is not peace. I stayed quiet for decades because I thought that was kindness. It wasn't kindness, it was a slow erasure. The mistake most people in my position make is believing that if they just give more, eventually the scale will balance. It doesn't. Some people have never been taught to balance it, and they won't learn from your patience, they will learn from your limits. What Rosa understood, and what I eventually understood, is that chosen family is not a consolation prize. It is not what you settle for when blood fails you. It is what happens when human beings see each other clearly, without obligation, without history, without debt, and decide, freely, to stay. I gave my house to the woman who made it livable again. I gave myself the peace of knowing I will not be forgotten when I can't care for myself. I gave my sons the truth about who they had become, which is the most honest gift I could have offered them. Whether they ever understand it is no longer my responsibility. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a number in the comments. Type 1 if you think I made the right call, type 2 if you understand my son's side even a little, or type 3 if this story brought up something from your own life. Where are you watching from today? And what time is it there? And if you have ever had to choose yourself over the people who were supposed to choose you first, tell me about it. I read every comment. Everyone. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe. These are the stories I'm here to tell, the ones that don't have easy answers, the ones that live in the gray spaces between love and survival. I'll be here every week. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Atlanta, Georgia to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.